All right, we have more changes unfolding in the U.S. economy and with the state of the U.S. consumer. Changes that have one of the largest investment banks in this country coming out yesterday and warning things are much worse than they'd previously thought. They know this because 75% of U.S. consumer companies already reported first quarter earnings. And the data shows the cliff is coming. The sectors that usually feel the pain last in a downturn are already bleeding. We have the report. We'll look at what they say is happening, what's about to come, what to expect, and why they've been wrong for the last 2 years. Also, which sectors are about to burn. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So the great US of A, the land of freedom and opportunity, the place to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard, right, and you'll be able to achieve the American dream. That's the promise. And it worked for almost a century, for our grandparents' generation, our parents' generation. But today, right now, that dream's virtually impossible to achieve. And in the last 3 years, it's gotten so far out of reach, 98% of Americans can't get close to touching it. This current period is what the Biden administration coined as Bidenomics. They brag about how good it is, yet it now takes $150,000 a year for a family to live the, quote, American dream. That's the median number, by the way, in all 50 states. According to this report, it would cost $138,000 a year for your family in Ohio, $147,000 a year in Texas. If you live in Florida, $159,000. If you live in New York, $194,000. And guess where it takes the cake? It would cost a whopping $245,000 a year for a family to earn in the state of California. Do you earn at least $150K a year? Well, right now you need to. 3 years ago, it was 38% less. So what the hell's happening here? Well, that's the dirty little secret, right? The inflation numbers are year over year, quarter over quarter. How much have prices risen from 12 months ago? So all these political pundits who say inflation's at 3 or 4% or whatever and pretend that they solved the problem, when in reality, prices overall are up almost 40% from 3 years ago. Some sectors up over like 80%, 100% even. And they have no plans on fixing that. Watch.
How do you convince Americans and voters that those prices might not go back to where they were before the pandemic?
Well, I think most Americans know that prices are not likely to fall. It's not the Fed's objective to try to push the level of prices back to where they were.
And speaking of California, take Riverside, right? It could be any county in California, but let's just take Riverside. Typical single-family home costs $546,000 today. 3 or 4 years ago, it was $356,000. That's 45% higher in just the last 3 years. How do you afford that? How about Seattle, Washington? Typical single-family home in Seattle, now $861,000 today. Up 32% since 2019. Even the markets, though, that are correcting, like Austin, Texas, prices there are correcting. They're falling, down 17% peak to trough. But still, typical house in Austin's 55% more expensive today than it was in 2019. Inflation's not under control. It's been moving higher for the last 6 months across the board, by the way. The Consumer Price Index moving higher. The Fed's favorite PCE price index moving higher. Even the Producer Price Index is up. This is called Bidenomics. We're living in a period of stagflation, where inflation's stuck high, moving higher, income's barely increasing or moving lower in a lot of cases, where the Fed is forced to keep the night rate at 5.5% just to manage all the wreckage from this federal spending. The more the government borrows, drawing up this nation's debt, the more dollars the Treasury needs to print, and each one diluting the value of the last, pushing inflation higher. Picture this, Jerome Powell, right? Running on a hamster wheel, unable to get off, because that's what he's doing. Lowering rates would send inflation soaring, so he needs to keep running, trying to pace himself at this 5.5%. Can't afford to go any faster. Each point higher the night rate goes, the interest expense on all the new money that they're printing goes up. All the existing debt that's expiring has to then be reborrowed at these higher rates. He's stuck. The Fed is legitimately stuck. Stan Druckenmiller, one of the most respected traders on Wall Street, came out last week. You may have seen this, slamming this administration's handling of the economy. Bidenomics coming out on CNBC to give them an F, saying their policies are failing. Watch.
If I was a professor, I'd give them an F. Basically, they misdiagnosed COVID and thought we were going into a depression. The Fed did too. I worried about it too in early days. The Fed eventually pivoted, better late than never. Treasury is still acting like we're in a depression. It's interesting because I've studied the Great Depression, and you had a private sector crippled with debt with basically no new ideas. So interventionist policies were called for and were effective. The private sector could not be more different today than it was in the Great Depression. Their balance sheets are fine, they're healthy, and have you ever seen more innovative ideas that the private sector could take advantage of now? You've got blockchain, you've got AI, you've got the whole thing. All government needed to do was get out of their way and let them innovate. Instead, they've spent and spent and spent. And my new fear now is that spending and the resulting interest rates on the debt that's been created are going to crowd out some of the innovation that otherwise would have taken place. We've got a 7% budget deficit at full employment. It's unheard of.
Look, what he's getting at is these people are squeezing what's left right out. That it could be saved, but they're doing the opposite. They're spinning up more and more debt, crushing the dollar in the process, fighting the Fed, and forcing the working poor in this country to be in a tougher spot than they already are. Meanwhile, the administration thinks Bidenomics is the best thing since Swiss cheese. Well, the big trading desks are positioning to take advantage of the fallout, folks. Take a look at this. Goldman sent this out yesterday on the 12th. Title of the report is Reflections Post Q1 Results. Consumer Caution Mounts as Cracks in Resilience Theme Emerge. Writing this, with more than 75% of the U.S. consumer universe having reported Q1 results, we see indications that the U.S. consumer is proving even more stretched than previously anticipated as inflation combined with softening in the macro, meaning lower payrolls and an uptick in unemployment, elevated gas prices, high interest rates continue eating into spending power and consumer confidence. This is coming from Goldman. Very bullish investment bank, and their consumer trading desk is already positioning to take advantage of the fallout. A few days ago, before they put this report out, Goldman's top consumer trader, Scott Fieler, sent a note to clients warning this: our desk is getting bearish on consumer and our soft landing basket, saying they've flipped. Things have changed. The consumer's suffering. We are in it now, folks. It's happening. You can see this when you look at consumer-oriented sectors, retail, food service. McDonald's, for example, specifically mentioned in this Goldman note, saying McDonald's, U.S. QSR industry comparable traffic was negative in Q1 and management expects it to remain negative for the full year. Separately, management noted that while the pressure may be more pronounced on low-income consumers, all income cohorts are seeking value. McDonald's, folks, all fast food restaurants are suffering. It's now bled through to the earnings as inflation stings. Nobody wants to spend $20 to eat at McDonald's. We showed this in a previous video 2 months ago, how a Big Mac meal now is like $18. The dollar menu, remember that? Barely, because it's gone. But there's reporting now that they're considering a $5 menu. They went from a dollar menu in 2016 to a $5 menu today. That's like a 500% jump in prices. That's where we are now. This is called stagflation. The value of your dollar continues deteriorating while your income barely grows. The course that we're on right now only goes one way: the destruction of the US dollar. It may take 5 or 10 years, 15 years, who knows, but it will fail unless the executive branch stops spending money like this. They could fix this. They just got to stop spending more money than they bring in. Biden just released his 2025 budget proposal. In it, he asked for $7.5 trillion in spending next year. That's almost double what the U.S. collects in tax revenue. Why would the Biden administration purposefully put us into trillions more debt? For what reason? In the past, presidents would only ask for excessive spending, irresponsible spending like this if we were facing some sort of crisis, a world war, a pandemic, something like that. I don't get it. I personally don't get it. And in this budget proposal, Biden proposes raising taxes to pay for it, he says. That's you giving more of your money to pay for their mistakes, their failed policies. We need change, folks. Something needs to change economically speaking. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.